Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us. Bob Cheevers is a Memphis-born, Austin-based singer-songwriter, producer, publisher, and performer. Over his career, he has spent time in Hollywood and Nashville and places in between. Bob enjoys playing live and has toured worldwide. In his career, he has recorded and played in both the pop, country, folk, and blues arenas. But he might be more at home in what is known as Americana. An Emmy-winning songwriter, Bob won Texas Music Awards 2011 Singer-Songwriter of the Year. But if you ask him, he's likely to say he's most proud of opening the show on Johnny Cash's final tour. Mr. Cheevers has released some 30-plus solo CDs to date, plus a 5 CD collection spanning 50 years. Bob's latest album is Legends and Kings. Well, welcome, Bob.
Well, hey.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Thanks for taking time out of your schedule doing this.
Well, it's my pleasure, and my favorite topic is me. So, and I have a lot to say about me because I've lived November 11th of this coming November 11th. I will have lived 80 years, so I have a lot to say.
Okay.
And I've said it most often in my songs, but I love doing interviews because I love talking to people who are interested in what I'm doing and who are interesting people. That's
Wow.
It's a two-way street.
So let's go back to the beginning. Talk about where you were born.
Okay, I grew up in Memphis. I was born in New London, Connecticut. My mother was up there visiting my dad because he was an officer in the Navy, and he was at the submarine division in I guess New Groton, which is near New London, Connecticut. So I was born there, but my grandmother came up to help my mother with me and took me back to Memphis on the train. I don't know how many, maybe a month or maybe even weeks after I was born. And my mom and her sister drove my dad's brand new Oldsmobile convertible back from from New London, Connecticut, back to Memphis, where I then grew up for the next 22 years and had a great childhood. Unfortunately, my mother was a single parent because my dad left her to go to war and went to Pearl Harbor, but didn't come home. He went back to his old girlfriend who he was with before he met my mom. And I guess he was on the rebound from her when he met my mom. And but instead of going back to my mom, he went back to his girlfriend. And his sister wrote my mother a letter saying, "Your husband is with his old girlfriend." That's how my mom found out. Wow. That's the side story, but right. I had a great childhood because my mom went back to her mom and dad's, and so I grew up in a great big house with my mom and my grandmother and my grandfather, and my mother's sister, who also had a failed marriage and brought her daughter back. So I had a sister, as though she was a sister, my cousin, in this great big house on Claybrook Street in Memphis. My mother played the piano every day of my life because she was a bit of a radio star when she was young in the 20s and 30s and accompanied the big bands like Benny Goodman and Paul Whiteman, people who would come through Memphis. She was a part of the radio program where they would come and she would accompany them. So I heard music, and my grandmother also played piano. And
okay.
It was all music all the time. But it never occurred to me to play music, and my mother never offered to teach me how to play the piano. And I think I was put off by her ability to play. She was an extraordinary piano player and singer. And she didn't, over the years when I started writing and playing. She didn't like my music because it was not her kind. She'd come home from work and I'd be sitting in my recliner rocker playing the radio, and she would say, "Get that trash off the radio and get some good music," which was, to her was the big bands, you know, and the stuff that I love. Also, I have a great connection with what came before rock and roll, and because of my mom, and yet when rock and roll came along, I remember standing on the bus stop at the bus stop in junior high waiting for the bus, and Elvis would drive by several times a week in his 57 Lincoln Continental mauve colored convertible.
Okay.
And I'd always wave at him, and it got to where he would wave back. Sometimes he would wave first. It was like I had a friend in Elvis, like having a friend in Jesus.
Right.
And
let me ask you this: did you happen to see the Elvis movie, the recent one?
I did. I loved it.
Okay, you thought it was a good depiction. Good.
I did, and the guy who played Elvis, come on, man, and he won I don't think he won the Oscar. Did he win an Oscar for that?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he did.
I don't think. Anyway, he was also in that movie. Something about Hollywood. He played one of the Charles Manson guys.
Okay.
It's just funny seeing him then, and then
Yeah.
he played this guy who looked. He was a beautiful looking. Elvis was a gorgeous looking man,
Yeah.
like unreal looking as a human being.
Yeah.
I had the great pleasure and thrill during my college years. I worked for an organization called Shelby United Neighbors, and we collected money from organizations and companies, and they would give the money to. It was a charitable collected money for charitable organizations, and Elvis gave $50,000 each year. And twice we went to Graceland. The first time Elvis wasn't there, but the next year, my executive director and I knocked on that big door, and the door opened, and there was the most famous human being on the planet, Elvis. Yeah. And he invited us in. His dad was there, and Priscilla was in the kitchen cooking what was probably his most famous meal, which was the hollowed out loaf of bread with a pound of bacon and probably a quart of Velveeta cheese.
He's in there. Not the healthiest meal, no.
So he offered my executive director the check for $50,000, and my executive director said, "Elvis, give that to Bob." I reached for the check in my hands, were shaking and my knees were weak. Couldn't seem to stand on my own 2 feet. I'm in love. I'm all shook up. So I said, "Elvis, what I'd rather have more than this check is I need to use your bathroom." And he laughed and he pointed to it, and I walked across a white shag carpet floor. My feet sunk up to my ankles in this white shag carpet.
Yeah.
I managed to get done with my job in the bathroom. And it was one of those things where you pray to God that the toilet flushes. And it did. And I walked back out and took the $50,000 and we left after a bit of a chat. But just imagine that. I was 18, I think. There's the most famous guy in the world. And he was also a Memphis guy like me.
Yeah.
And I told him the story about seeing him and getting my tennis racket and pretending I was playing guitar. And he thought that was funny.
Yeah, I used to do that myself.
Yeah.
Well, did you guys at some point get a hi-fi stereo to play records at home, or?
Did we at my family's home? Is that what you're asking? Yeah. My mother bought me a little 45. It just played 45s. It was a little, almost a portable thing, but She would go into town every weekend and bring me back a 45 that I'd usually ask her to bring me back, and I'd sit it on my lap, and I would play that thing over 50, 60 times in a row, you know.
Do you
Turn
remember
it over.
one of your first 45s? Do you remember?
I don't, but
Yeah.
it very likely was Elvis. I remember, what was it? Dum 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 dum. Come Go With Me was the name of that.
Yes, yes.
I
Come and go
remember,
with. Come and go
yeah,
with. Who is that?
I remember the Del Vikings.
Okay, right. Yeah, yeah.
And Pat Boone. There was who was the Fats Domino.
Oh yeah.
And then it went on to the Beach Boys and then the Beatles. But by then it was, I think we had a stereo.
Yeah.
And speakers, and I think at that point marijuana might have come into the picture, and we would lay between the speakers and listen to the Beatles. You know how you'd get your friends together every time a new Beatle record came out. I mean, it was an event, and we'd gather around and get stoned and listen. I was never the same, certainly after Elvis came along, but the Beatles really changed my life. And there's a whole story about all that, but then also the Buffalo Springfield. The Beatles for me were out of reach. They were not of this earth, you know, and then,
yeah,
and they were English too. And but the Beach Boys, I'm sorry, the Buffalo Springfield, for some reason, I connected with Neil's music, especially nowadays. Clancy Can't Even Sing, which was on their first record, and he didn't sing it. Richie Furay sang that song.
Right.
Another story there, but I thought at that point that if Neil Young at 18 could write that song, and I was about 20, maybe 22 by then,
yeah,
maybe I could write. Although I had started writing in college, it was still, it really got serious when I heard the Buffalo Springfield.
You know, my all-time favorite Buffalo Springfield song is "Expecting to Fly." That's just, you know.
I just got giant chill bumps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
another Neil Young written track, but wonderful.
And it showed that of all of his songs, I think, other than maybe Man Needs a Maid or a few others, the breadth of his writing ability, going into different chord and different keys, and the transitions musically that he made in so many of his songs were just stunning.
Yeah.
People had trouble with his voice, but it at some point, if you choose to, you get to decide, this is a man who is saying things that I can identify with, that make a difference in my life, and I know he means it, and he's singing like he means it, and forget about his voice, you know.
Well,
listen to his heart.
The same kind of situation with Bob Dylan too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is not the best.
Yeah.
But you got to listen, like you said, to the meat of what he's singing about. Well, was guitar your first instrument?
It was. My mother bought me one of those little sort of what they call a parlor guitar. And I think it might have even been one that had cowboy stuff painted on the top, you remember those?
Yeah.
She gave me guitar lessons, and that lasted till my math grade tanked.
Oh,
And
okay.
she didn't connect the fact that music is mathematical,
Right.
and also the fact that she told me over and over I was like her. I was bad at math, so I wound up being bad at math. And if not that it made a difference in my career that she had me stop taking guitar lessons, but that's something that always bothered me about my mother. Probably what I thought was the worst choice in my mother's life in terms of how relating to me as her son.
Right.
I'll ask her when I go to heaven.
Right. Right.
That if there is a heaven, that is.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
Well, we'll talk about, so you were pretty much self-taught on guitar?
Yeah, a friend of mine in college, I borrowed a friend of mine's Sears and Roebuck
Okay.
Silvertone.
Okay.
It had black diamond strings that were very rusty. It would not tune, but it was a guitar, and it was a 6-string, and it was a big jumbo. And that's where how my first songs were written.
Okay.
We started a little combo in college,
College. Okay.
playing Stone songs, playing Beatles songs, playing the Kinks,
Yeah.
rock and roll stuff, And the first compliment that I remember getting really in my life about anything was we were asked to play for my fraternity's party, and we were horrible, but we could play 10 or 12 songs, and we just played them over and over. But at a break, I was taking a piss in the men's room, and a guy came in and stood in the stall next to me, and he said, "Man, you're really great. You really handled yourself well on stage." And I thought, "Oh, thanks." And I thought, I took him for his word. I thought he must know, because nobody had ever said that. And he just did. He said that. And that was different from what my mother told me about me being bad at math. What
Yeah.
my junior high school basketball teacher or PE teacher told me when I went out for basketball. He said, "Cheevers, you're not an athlete. Go put your street clothes on." And what my producer in Hollywood told me when I played him the first batch of songs that I had written, he said, "You're not a songwriter, Bob. Just sing what we give you to sing," which was songs that Bobby Sherman or Neil Diamond sounded like. And they would tell me to sing like whoever was popular at the time, Neil and Bobby Sherman, and Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Tiny Purple Dot Bikini. That was popular.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ryan Hyland was on the same label that I was on,
Yeah.
Dot Records.
Yeah.
And it didn't occur to me till I took LSD that I had a voice, not only as a singer, but as a human being. And that would happen to be in concert with my dear friends who were in a group called the Peppermint Trolley Company that was produced by the same producer as me. His name was Dan Dalton.
Okay.
And he got us all major label record deals, so that wasn't a bad thing. And I remember, well, you want me to talk about that band
Yeah,
since we're
sure.
there, or
Sure, yeah.
do we need to go backwards, or what do you like?
Oh, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay. There was an original Peppermint Trolley Company with the Jimmy and Danny Farragher, who later were called the Farragher Brothers. They were also called Bones after they quit Dan Dalton's production company. They had the hit song called "Baby You Come Rolling Across My Mind." it was number 34 on the charts, which was, in terms of top 40 back then, was really good.
Yeah.
Because it was, and that was back when there were no albums. It was a singles deal. You got a deal for one single, and if that single made it, you could make another single. And then I guess if you made enough singles that made it into the charts, then you could make an album. But they had one hit, and then because of the inequities between them and Dan, they quit, and Dan formed a second Peppermint Trolley Company, which was me and Dave McIntosh and Tom Maston and a guy named Smith. I forget his first name. And we had a bunch of chart records after that. We also did the theme because we were on DOT, it was owned by Paramount, which also was the movie and TV thing. And
Right.
we got to do the theme song for Love American Style.
Okay. Right.
And I'll never forget, a guy named Charlie Fox had written the songs for that series.
Uh-huh.
It was the first sitcom, and each weekly show had 3 segments.
Uh-huh.
So we sang not only the main theme song, but we would do the 3 segment songs for each show. And we went up to Charlie Fox's penthouse on Sunset Boulevard to learn these songs. And one of them was an exact note for note the same as a Marlboro commercial.
Oh, okay.
And I told Charlie, I said, man, you're stealing this commercial.
Yeah.
You might want to rethink that. And here I am, a 20-year-old-ish guy telling a big Hollywood writer what was wrong. And my producer, Dan Dalton, reamed my ass after that meeting. We didn't even get out the door before he was down my throat for telling this guy what I told him. And I said, look, it's the truth. Anyway, that was that. But this is sort of the same thing happened with me and my group of guys that were in the Peppermint Trolley Company. We, especially after taking LSD, I couldn't go along with singing, them telling me to sing like Neil Diamond or like whoever was popular.
Yeah.
By then I knew Bob Cheevers had a voice.
Yeah.
And I had written a bunch of songs. And just the other day, I found in my drawer about 15 handwritten pages written by my first wife, who was with me during once again, because of psychedelics, it brought me to my senses that the Hollywood thing was a sham. It was an empty vessel. It was a hollow experience for a young person like me, who they tried to mold into somebody who would do and be what they said. They wanted me to dress a certain way and look a certain way. And I no longer wanted to do that. I only wanted to be me and write songs I wanted to write, and I wanted to sing them from my heart and my soul. And that didn't work well for them. So we left Hollywood and found a ranch in Northern California and lived on it for a bunch of years. But I would still come to Hollywood because Neil Young was my favorite. So I went to Neil's manager and asked him, I said, this is crazy, but would you consider managing me? And they listened to my songs and they chose to do that. And this 15 pages of stuff that I found the other day was a daily diary that went from November 12th of 1970 to December 24th of 1970. It was a month long, but it's every day 4 major labels were vying to sign me for $100,000 advance.
Wow.
MCA was trying to sign me to a publishing deal for $50,000 a year. We met with my manager lived in Joni Mitchell's house, and I would say I would sleep in Joni Mitchell's bed and write songs on her piano, which is true. More of the truth was that Joni didn't live there anymore. Ron Stone, my manager, lived there. He was one of the guys with Elliot Roberts and David Geffen and Gold Mountain Management was the name of the company, because Joni's house was on Gold Mountain Drive in Laurel Canyon. So that was quite an experience. And all this stuff that I found in this paper, these 15 pages, are about that month that went on for months. And the result, it was based on 4 songs that I had brought to Ron to pitch for me. And it turned out Albert Grossman was in the picture, Bob Dylan's manager. He wanted to take over from Ron and manage me. And we met with Graham Nash, who wanted to produce this record. We met with John Boylan, who was Linda Ronstadt's boyfriend, and a great producer. He wanted to produce. Linda wanted to be involved. It was the top of the line of people in Hollywood who I really looked up to.
Yeah.
I mean, you really couldn't get any bigger than Dylan, the Eagles, Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young, Joni Mitchell, Jackson Browne. My publishing company that I wound up writing for, I wrote for MCA till we moved out of Hollywood, and I started writing songs about the country like Neil was on his Harvest album. And they fired me, and then I got a writing deal with Bo Golson at Criterion Music in Hollywood, and he wanted me to go to Nashville because they were pitching me as a writer and an artist, a country artist, which is another story. But in that publishing company was Jackson Browne, Lyle Lovett, Roseanne Cash, Rodney Crowell, 2 or 3 more artists who I can't remember who were stars, and me. And it was pretty daunting to be in a writer's meeting with people who I had admired for years.
Yeah.
And now I was in the middle of that. And I think at that point, I didn't believe that I could pull my own weight.
Okay.
Later I was able to, and now I am, but back then I was really out of my league, and bless their hearts for having faith in me. I feel like if what they thought was going to happen had happened, I think they would have been disappointed in me, because I don't think I had the goods at that point to do what they thought I was capable of doing. And I wasn't trying to pull anything over on them. It was, my songwriting was there, and that's what they were basing it all on. And my personality and what they felt that I believed as a person, and the way that I led my life. All of that was the basis for why I looked at them, because they were those kind of people. And it was those kind of people I wanted to be associated with, because that's the kind of person I felt like I was. And so I was in the right crowd. I just was a little bit before my time, maybe.
A little ahead of your time. Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Interesting you mentioned the Eagles. Sad to hear of Randy Meisner's passing. You know, that was kind of a little unexpected, I guess. While you were out there in California, is that when you started the Bob Cheevers Sacramento Songwriters Showcase?
Yeah, so
or did that come
So
over?
we moved out of Hollywood to the ranch up in Placerville, which is 50 miles up the hill from Sacramento. And I after MCA fired me, I sat every day for 6 weeks in front of a fan because we didn't have air conditioning. We built our own house up on the ranch. And it was in the summer, and it was probably easily 100 degrees outside, inside too, for that matter. And I sat in front of the fan and I learned 60 songs of mine. And I went down to Sacramento and I got a job playing 3 nights a week at the Stony Inn of America. It just opened, and I was the first person that auditioned, and I made $50 a night, 3 years playing 2 or 3 nights a week. And that led to, what was the question you asked? Oh, yeah. That led to me having come out of the 60s, being married and not being able to indulge in the free love thing. The 70s came along, early 70s, when I was playing 3 nights a week at Stony Inn of America and writing songs about the glory and grace of being in love with my wife, and how 2 people could be together and form this bond that was forever. And that was like a magnet to the girls who were married to husbands who didn't live up to the man that they saw me being.
Oh.
And so there I was with all the girls in the front row, and I put it off as long as I could. And then I'm sad to say, I let them have me in a short phrase. And that ruined my marriage. And I wound up divorcing and coming back to Sacramento. And years after that is when the Bob Cheevers Sacramento Songwriter Showcase happened, which was a giant success. We had a monthly show with it was a different genre each month. And we had a star in that genre each month. And that's where I met another bunch of great folks, including Kevin Welch, who was a Nashville star at the time. He was a star in the context of being a writer who Jim Ed Norman, the president of Warner Brothers, when I wound up meeting with Jim Ed in Nashville, he said, "Bob, we don't know what to do with Kevin Welch. We don't know how to market him. So I can't give you a deal because we wouldn't know how to market you either." That's what happened when I went to Nashville. But back to the Sacramento thing, I became again the biggest fish in the small pond, and it was really wonderful. And when Kevin came and he stayed at our house, he said, "Bob, I don't think you need to move to Nashville. You have everything here. You're going to be a small fish in a big pond if you come to Nashville."
Okay.
Well, I didn't take his word, and I moved to Nashville, and he was right. And he gave me some great advice. He said, "Don't burn your meetings." I said, "What does that mean?" He said, "Move to Nashville, get the lay of the land, meet people. They'll get to know who you are. Don't even think about your career. Just get there and enjoy being in Nashville, and it'll all come to you." I didn't take his advice, and I started making meetings, getting meetings with the people who I wanted to meet, who I thought could give me what I thought I deserved, which was a major label deal. And my publisher was pushing me in that direction. And once again, I wasn't ready, because it's a true story that when you get to Nashville, it takes at least 5 years to get the lay of the land, to make the connections, to connect the dots, to meet the right people. to get into the group that where you belong and which can take you to the place where you need to be because of the person you are, a writer you are, the artist you are, yada yada.
Okay.
That that kind of backfired on me. And the good news was that my publisher said, when I moved there to Nashville, he said, we're pitching you as a writer, as an artist, but he said, I want you to write for the market, the country market. Let's try to make some money. So I tried to write for the market. He would set up writing meetings for me with hit writers. It didn't work for me. I didn't feel comfortable doing that because each Monday they would give us a sheet of who was recording.
Mhm.
And we were told to write for those artists like Reba McEntire. We were told to go by her record, her last record, see what kind of songs she was recording.
Yeah.
And then write those kinds of songs and then pitch those songs to her. And she was just one of the many artists who were popular then, but that didn't feel good to me because all I wanted to do was write songs for me. I wanted to sing my songs.
Right.
Eventually, my publisher, who was really smart, and when I told you who he had in his stable of writers, you get it. He took me aside and he said, I want you to go back to writing Bob Cheevers songs because that's where your strength lies. And that's why I hired you. And that was like a big albatross being taken off my neck.
Yeah.
Because he saw me for who he knew I was. And that gave me the freedom to go back to writing for me. And he and I shared the joy of that over the next few years. Unfortunately, he died. But he and I became great friends, and he was my hero because he was the one who, number one, told me to write for the market, and number two, told me don't write for the market. And it was at that point that my first record of me happened. It was called Gettysburg to Graceland.
Okay.
And my dear friend Charlie White produced that record, and he got all of the cool, hip, admired players to play on that record. And it was my best record of my career. It got, I think it went to number 24. I did have a top 20 record though later on, but I think that record means the most to me because of where I had come from when I made it.
Talk about recording that, and was that your first time going into a recording studio?
No, I had recorded many songs and records with other producers in the pop field when I was in LA and doing the pop thing. And I had recorded hundreds of songs in Nashville and in demo studios, particularly County Q. It was called the County Q Recorders. It was owned by a friend of mine, Scott Mary, who had been in a band that I was in the 70s in Indiana called the String Bean String Band. And we were a regional monster popular group. And a millionaire brought us to California to try to be famous. And he walked into Sunset Recorders and gave the receptionist a gram of Coke and said, I want to see your most famous and powerful producer. And it turned out to be a guy named Bob Margouleff, who had produced Stevie Wonder, who produced a number of other major artists and so my millionaire guy offered Margouleff $10,000 and what are the cars, you know, not Jaguar, you know, the bigger cars, not Mercedes,
Lamborghini.
Lamborghini, or what was the other one?
What is not
Ja-
Jaguar,
Uh,
not
it's
Mercedes.
got it's got the sort of the well, it's like a Lamborghini. Yeah, so he gave him a Lamborghini and 10 grand to produce the band I was in.
Okay.
It was a complete backwards connection, but it was fun, and we all lived in this gigantic mansion out in Simi Valley, somewhere out in the valley. And we each got paid $200 a week and got a gram of coke, and everything else was paid. And we had he owned a Volvo dealership, and we all had new Volvos to drive. We had a fleet of Volvos. Everything was paid for. And a building in Century City with the for the offices to run the band, you know. It was outrageous. Back to Nashville though, because that all ended, and the Nashville thing came to an end to me when I just couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't write that kind of music anymore. I'd met a bunch of wonderful friends. The head of BMI told me when I moved to Nashville, he said, "You're a good person. People are going to see who you are, and they're going to like you, and they're going to embrace you. And if your songs make it, then you're good to go here in Nashville. And welcome to the rat race," or whatever it was.
Big time, yeah.
And he was right. And I don't know whether if I had stuck it out, maybe it would be a different story. But if I'd stuck it out and I was still there, Nashville is now what it is now, which is not what it was when I was there.
Yeah.
Because as soon as I moved to Nashville, everything changed, and all the fucking guys from LA who I had grown up with in the pop field moved there because Nashville had then become a country rock.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was all the homeboys that my friends from LA came, and it was a sort of a circle closed, and then Austin somehow came onto the horizon for me, and I came here, and it was exactly where I needed to come because there was no major labels, there's no publishers, there's no PR people. Austin is called the performing capital of the world of America. It's changed dramatically in the 10 years I've been here.
Yeah.
It's just deteriorated in that regard to the point where I'm ready to leave. I can't, because my wife is an Austin girl, so we're not going anywhere. And we just bought a brand new house that's amazing. I have a 400 square foot studio I never dreamed of having this gift of what I'm doing now and what I'm getting to do. And the place that I've made for myself in Austin, although it's sort of like LA and Nashville, I've outgrown Austin, and I'm just here because this is where I wound up.
Okay.
I love being here. I love my friends here in Austin. And I love my wife, and I love where we live and what we get to do.
Yeah.
But I'm here in my studio. Since COVID, I've written over 200 songs. I'm learning how to play my own parts that I never knew how to play on the guitar and piano. And I have a studio with all the accoutrements, the plugins. I can play every instrument in the world now by my keyboard, on my keyboard.
Yeah.
I have a set of electronic drums that I play. I started out being a drummer in high school.
Okay.
So I have that now. I have keyboards and at my fingertips, all the instruments that exist in my computer. So
Right.
I've learned how to produce my own records and play all the parts on my own songs. And that all happened because of COVID. I had to quit
Right.
playing 3 to 5 nights a week in clubs. And I
Right.
toured Europe for 20 years in a row.
Yeah. Wow.
Got the experience of a lifetime, met people that are my family who open their homes and their hearts to me and who I still stay in touch with. And this is living the dream for me. And I'll be 80 in a few months. I almost died last summer from a sinus infection that went real south, and I had sepsis and pneumonia and made it into the hospital just before I died.
Really? Okay.
And it's taken this last year to come back, and I'm feeling better now than I've felt in 10 years. And it took a year to get back. And there's still things that are issues for me health-wise, but I'm almost 80.
Yeah.
I can't believe that. And I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And Willie is 90 and he's still doing it, you know.
You're right. Right. You're right. Yeah.
So I have no complaints.
Yeah.
I do have some complaints, but air conditioning in my car went out a couple of months ago, and I've been driving around. It's been over 100 in Texas for 2
Right.
months, at least a month.
Yeah.
And the AC in my car is gone, so it's 150 in my car.
Right.
Driving
That
around.
just happened. We got back to back. Our AC unit on our house went out. And then a couple of weeks later, my wife's car, the AC went out. We just got that fixed. Yeah. So it's funny
Yeah.
how it happens in the hottest time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Well, we just paid twice as much as we were going to pay for a house. And my wife said, you're just going to have to drive around with no air conditioning because we don't have the money right now to get it fixed. And
yeah.
And that's been just fine with me. So
Right.
I resented that at first, but
Yeah.
I've gotten to feel like I'm bigger than life because I'm having to do that, you know. Maybe that's some of what's helped me get stronger, is having to do these things that have been put in my path that I didn't want, I didn't like, and yet I've been able to conquer them or learn how to deal with them, is a better way to put it. But
That's right. You know, what's the saying? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You know, what doesn't.
Yeah, I
Something
think
like
that's really true. Yeah,
you know.
I'll buy that.
Well,
If you loan me the money, I'll buy it.
there you go. Right.
Go ahead.
I did want to hear about your song "Big City Gambler." Did you feel like when you wrote that song that it was big hit material? Did you have a feeling?
I don't think so. I remember writing that song. We were moving to Nashville. My second wife and I were moving to Nashville, and her son and my dog, our dog and I we were driving the U-Haul, and she was in the car up ahead, and we were going across the Memphis, Arkansas bridge, and I was writing that song.
Okay.
And by the time we got to Nashville, I had written that song. Wait a minute. I'm thinking of a different song now. Big City Gambler was written, I can't remember when that was written now.
1986.
Yeah, maybe before. Now I wish I could think of the song I was writing going to Nashville, but that song, Big City Gambler, I had a connection with Elvis, other than having met him back in college. But it was his, I forget who it was, but my friend, whoever this person was, got it to Elvis. And it was on the short list of songs that he was going to record on his next album when he died. That was pretty disappointing.
Yeah.
And so I went ahead and made a music video of it, which won an Emmy for best historical musical composition. That was 1986. And I put it on a record of mine, and nothing happened to it. Similar to the song that Johnny Cash recorded of mine called River of Jordan.
Okay.
And I remember very distinctly writing that song in Sacramento, and I was watching a Dolly Parton video about a river. And I wrote River of Jordan between the beginning of the video of hers and the end of the video of hers. I wrote the lyrics of that song. And I remember writing the music, and then I went to Tower Records to get her album with that song that she did to see if I had stolen her song when I was writing my song, and I didn't. So because of my friend Brad Kohlrick in LA, who had gotten me the deal for Gettysburg to Graceland, he knew, he did commercials in addition to being a record guy. And he had did a commercial with Johnny Cash, a Chevy commercial, and he met Lou Robin, who was Johnny's manager.
Okay.
And played some of my songs for Lou. And I'm not sure how, I guess Lou gave Cash River of Jordan. And at that time, after that, my wife, second wife, and I moved to Nashville. And there was that thing I may have mentioned earlier about the 5-year deal. If you move, it takes at least 5 years for something to happen.
Yeah.
So she said, all right, I'll give you 5 years. And I'll never forget, I was sitting at the table and she put a want ad paper in front of me at the kitchen table. And I said, well, what's this? And she said, it's been 5 years. What kind of job are you going to get? And I said, well, wait a minute. it maybe it's not exactly 5 years. It could be 5 to 8 years. A lot of things are happening right now. So let's, and I had plenty of money then because another long story, I got wealthy in what's called the Caribbean trade, but that's a completely different story. And we got in a big argument in my studio, which was in the downstairs of our wonderful house in Nashville, arguing again about money. When are you going to get a job? Well, it's a lot of things are happening. At that moment, the phone rang, and my old Memphis friend Keith Sykes, who had been pitching my songs at that point, called me to say, Johnny Cash is recording your song tomorrow. Because he had pitched it to, he had also pitched it to Cash's company.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting my people mixed up here. So the next day, Cash recorded River of Jordan, and it was on a record of songs that was next to be released by Cash, but he put that record on hold because he went to, where was it? Jerusalem.
Okay.
On some kind of a spiritual quest. And he came back with a whole new outlook about his spirituality and wanted to make a record about that. And the record with my song, River Jordan got shelved forever. And I wound up talking to Buddy Cannon, who produced that record some years ago, who said the only answer he had was that the Cash family had it in the vault of Cash's, all the stuff that he's recorded. And he said that song may never be heard, or it may be heard one of these days, but I've never heard it. And I'd love to hear that song of mine that Johnny Cash recorded.
You think that's why you might have been invited to open for Johnny Cash? He remembered you with that song?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
it was at the same time he had recorded the song.
Okay.
And let me take that back. No, that's right. He recorded the song and I went on the tour.
Mm-hmm.
And later on in that tour, each night, his manager and his handler would walk him to this corner of the stage, and they'd take off his long coat and they'd give him a shove out to the microphone, and he'd walk out and grab the microphone and say, "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash." And the only time he would turn around was when he turned to ask June to come up and sing a duet with him.
Yeah.
And this one night, he dropped his pick as he was turning around, and he bent over to pick it up and he fell over. And that was the last time he ever sang a song. Actually, he sang a few years later, he sang a song at June Carter's Carter family reunion, but he died not long after that.
Yeah, he did.
And I'm confused about how it went when he recorded the song, when he went to Jerusalem, the tour and all that. That was, remember, I'm getting older and my mind is not what it used to be. Not that it ever was.
That's quite all right.
But just take my word. All this, I don't know if any of this is true, but it happened to me.
There you go. I like that quote.
I finally got to get it in.
It's your truth, right, Bob?
It's the way I was there, man. For me, it's like reading those 15 pages that my wife wrote. Yeah. I don't remember a lot of that. I don't remember most of it, but it was written down, and she doesn't remember it either. She's over time. Yeah. But it fucking happened, man.
Well, going back to Nashville, jumping back and forth here a little bit. How did you come to organize and produce that benefit series for the Alive?
Alive Hospice. Great question, and thank you for asking that. My second wife, Debbie, was a hospice nurse, and when I was doing the Songwriter showcases in Sacramento, my best friend in life, who I had known since we were 13, he was dying of cancer, and Alive Hospice in Sacramento assigned Debbie, this woman, a hospice nurse, to see him through the dying process. I was there every day of that dying process, which took, hospice was on board for 6 weeks. Debbie came on, and at which point it began his literal process of dying with hospice on board. So his mother was there, my best friend, Steve Holzapfel, and I, and his mother and Debbie, who she taught all of us how to help him die. And in the process of his dying, Debbie and I fell in love because I was so in awe of this woman who was able to know what she knew and do what she did, and help me with my friend. who was dying. And it meant so much to me to get the honor of getting to do that with and for him, and with her, and with Steve, and with Richard's mother. And that brought me into the relationship with her and Live Hospice. Later on, we got married, and we moved to Nashville because she wanted to go to Vanderbilt and get her nurse practitioner's degree, which she did get. And her hospice organization in Nashville asked me if I would do a benefit show for them, and I said, of course. So I got as many people that I knew at that time that were big draws in the songwriting community. And in Nashville, the songwriter's king, make no mistake. And so the people came to see those shows. It was actually one show. I guess it was, I forget what year it was. It was maybe 91 or 92. But that one show turned into 2 shows every night during the month of January. I did those shows every year for 8 years. I orchestrated each of the shows, recruited the talent for the 2 shows each night at the Bluebird Cafe, where I had become a what do you call it, a stalwart performer. And they let me do anything I wanted to do there because I became part of that, basically part of the organization there. Anyway, the series became, and is still, the longest running and most popular benefit series in Nashville and at the Bluebird.
At the Bluebird. Is it still going?
It's still going, and that would be like 92 or 3 through, so that's 10, 20, that's going on 25 years.
Yeah. And
it's still, every show is sold out with people waiting outside, what a thrill. And I got to, not only did I get to meet every person in Nashville of any stature, but they always came the next year and said, can we do the show again, Bob? And they would always invite me at each of the 2 shows every night to come up and sing with whoever the 4 people in that show were. And I became friends with all of them. And one of my favorite show was Jim Photoglow, is a star, hit writer there. Mike Reed, who was a defensive end of the Cincinnati Bengals, has written so many hit songs. And when I met Mike Reed and shook his hand, I have big hands. My hand disappeared in Mike Reed's hand. And his hand was so soft, and that's what they wanted in a defensive end. I guess somebody who could catch the ball, even though he was a defensive end, but could grab he was like, if you can imagine those things that go around cars and pick them up.
He would just swallow whatever.
And yet he would sit at the piano. He and his pal, I can't think of his name right now. They co-wrote "I Can't Make You Love Me" that Bonnie Raitt sang, which is one of my favorite songs, one of my 2 or 3 favorite songs in life. And I had the thrill at Chet soundcheck, me and Mike sitting at the Bluebird, singing that song together. And then he said, I'm going to play a new song. and he played a song, and I'm able to hear a song the first time and then sing it, the chorus, the next time it comes around. So I listened to him sing the verse and the chorus. And the time the chorus came around, the second time I sang it in harmony, he got to the end and he stopped and he said, "Where have you heard this song before?" And I said, "I've never heard it. I just heard it when you sang it." He said, how did you sing that? How did you do that?" I thought, well, doesn't anybody here in Nashville, anybody can do that, right? Another great story was Mike and I and Photo Glow were sitting at the Bluebird, and Michael McDonald, who Photo Glow had gotten to be part of the show, and he's still part of the show. Mike Reed, Mike McDonald, Photo Glow, and I'll think of it in a minute. The four of them are still doing that show every year. And so we're sitting there waiting for Mike McDonald to get there. And finally he arrives in coveralls and Wellingtons, those boots that you wear, you know, the rubber boots.
Yeah.
They call them wellies in Scotland. And in the UK, you can get wellies in all different colors. They're a fad. Anyway, Mike comes in and he said, "I apologize. I'm sorry. I was in my house having come up from working in the pond, and my dog started barking, and I didn't know what was wrong, but I figured I better react to him. So I followed him down to the pond, and my son was in the pond and he was drowning. And I got in and I managed to save him, and he's all right. But I made it. I just wanted you to know that's why I'm late to the sound check." Mike. And there he is. He had mud all over him and mud on his Wellingtons. And he went back home after the sound check and came back and we played that night. But boy, what a story, and what a thrill to get to hear Michael McDonald's songs. Just call the door, yeah. With him singing there. Gary Burr is the fourth guy. Gary has had more songs on the charts more hit songs on the charts at the same time than any writer in the history of Nashville.
Really? Okay.
Just an amazing songwriter, and I love his songs. So all of that stuff in Nashville, it was like heaven, and like being there with these people who were the biggest, most successful people, and for the right reasons they were the most successful. They were writing the songs because there's all kinds of songs that are hit songs that are worthless, but they're hits, you know, like that in my career, Yellow Itsy Witsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini. It's called a novelty song. When I moved to Nashville, my publisher said, "Don't play your novelty songs or you'll become known as a novelty songwriter in Nashville." So I said, "Ooh," because I'd written all these songs like Large Marge and Underpants and I Like Sheep. So I didn't play any of them for a couple of years. And finally, there's this thing each month that happened called Songmania. And the purpose of it was to let some steam off and play your instructions were to play the worst song you'd ever written, or the dumbest song, or whatever that you'd ever written, that you'd never pitched to anybody. So I played Underpants, my song called Underpants. And so what would happen was there were four writers, each song would play their worst song. I played Underpants. After the four songs were played, the audience voted on the best song or on the worst song. My song won. At the end of the night, and at the end of after after I forget how this works, but after each song, there was the audience voted on the loser.
Okay.
So at the end of the night, the best song was voted on, and my song lost, but my excuse won.
Oh,
So
okay.
I was just say at the end of each song, the losers had to say what their excuse was for why their song didn't win.
Uh-huh.
So at the end of the night, that is, my excuse was, I've just moved here from California. In California, having sex with sheep isn't a bad thing, which wasn't really true, but it was what I said. And my excuse won. So I got a little plaque saying, your excuse won, and it's still on my wall somewhere. I gotta plug my, battery's going dead here.
Yeah.
So if you take all of these things that we've been talking about, and I would like to have a copy of this show, because I don't think I've ever explained all this stuff to this extent. So,
that's what I'm glad. I feel privileged that you are. I thank you for going off on some of these tangents and
yeah,
recalling so much, because that's what viewers respond to. The interesting stories and the anecdotes. That's what they enjoy. They enjoy it. Yeah. I did want to ask you real quick about how did you and Dave Greaves hook up and start working together? If you'd like to.
Yes, I do. 20 years ago, when I started touring Europe, it started out touring Europe and wound up in focusing on the UK because they got my jokes.
Yeah.
And they could understand my language, And in Hull, which is in the Midlands of England, there was a show that I was invited to play. It was every Wednesday night at this place called the Springhead in Hull. It was a really famous, great pub. It had great music, and this guy Michael Greaves, was the house band on Wednesday nights. And they'd have a guest if a guest was traveling through Hull, and and I wound up playing there every tour at Springhead, and Dave Greaves is Mike's brother. Okay. He was in the band, and he played. I would sit in with Mike and play some songs with Mike's band, and then I'd play sort of a solo set, and his brother Dave Greaves sat in with me, and it was like he knew my songs, but he didn't. It was like me singing with Mike Reed. Uh-huh. And it was just one of those magical connections. And the first time we did that, later after the show, he and I stood around in the middle of that pub, and we talked for a couple of hours and about things, about life, and we felt each other. We felt each other's spirit, if you will. And so each year I came back, and it was always great to see him, but Dave and I especially. And then Springhead closed down, and I wound up playing at a couple of other places, and then there was this one place in St. John's, it's called, and they had a night called Tuesday at the Tap, and I wound up playing there the last bunch of years. And Mike, I would always ask Mike and Dave to come in and do what they call support, which is like an opening act. And then they'd play, we'd all wind up playing together because we were all good friends. And at one of the shows, Dave held up his guitar from across the room, and he said, "Look, Bob," and it had a bumper sticker on it that said "On Earth as It Is in Austin." And later, it was like, oh, I'd never heard that. And a friend of his from England had lived in Austin and had bought him that bumper sticker, which he put on his guitar. And he knew I was living in Austin at the time. And so I wrote that song, and it's the title of the album. It's 15 songs, and I got 15 of Austin's most celebrated musicians to play on one song each. It's probably my favorite album. My wife did all the artwork, and the songs are great. And I didn't remember at that time that it was Dave who had given me the idea.
The idea behind it. Was that the album you produced?
Yes.
Okay. How did
Yeah.
you like being in the producer's chair? How did you?
Well, I'd been producing myself
Okay.
forever.
Yeah.
I say producing myself, doing my own home recordings, demos, you know. Charlie White came along, and from Gettysburg to Graceland, for the next 10 or 12 albums, he produced every one. And then he he played on most of the others, a song or two. He went on, he's my favorite ever guitar player, Charlie White. I met him in Nashville when he was playing guitar for a friend of mine. And I just fell in love with his guitar playing. And later on, when I was looking to write with somebody and a guitar player, and somebody gave me his name, and I didn't know who that was. And I went to his house, and he opened the door, and I said, "Oh, it's you. You're the guy that I saw." Yeah. And we became best friends, and we'd write every week or two, and he was a great cook. He'd cook a loaf of bread, and we'd have a hot loaf of bread and a good meal, and then we'd go out on his veranda, which is right next to the golf course. And we'd be riding, and these guys in the golf carts would come by. It was just a funny situation. But very sadly, Charlie had a major stroke a couple of months ago, and he had been the guitar player for Winona Judd's band for the last few years. And just rocking that band into a couple of new records and really bringing that band up. He's the man of my life, you know, like Dave Greaves, Charlie White's like that. So is Stephen Doster here, who's still alive and didn't have a stroke. And I'll tell you about him in a minute. But so the last tour that I did was 2019. And Dave Greaves wasn't answering my emails about, "Are you going to come play with me again when I'm in home?" I didn't hear from him. And finally, people were telling me Dave Greaves is retired. They didn't know what the truth was, which was that Dave Greaves had been diagnosed with a rare form of multiple sclerosis called MSA. I don't know what the A stands for, but he didn't want to see anybody. Didn't want anybody to see him. I said, "I don't know what it is that's going on with you." I didn't find out till I went to see him. I said, "I'm coming to see you." He lived in Scarborough, which is a couple hours train ride from home. So I went to see him. It was at the end of the tour. And it was awful. He couldn't play and he couldn't sing. He was a world-class musician. And so as I was leaving, and we cried and I played him some songs. And as he was leaving, his partner, Christine, gave me a handful of albums. And I said, "What are these?" And she said, "These are Dave's albums." I said, "I didn't know he made albums. I didn't know he wrote songs." And later on, Dave said, I said, "Why didn't you tell me you were a songwriter?" And he said, I was backing you, Bob. I didn't want my work to get in the way of it." And he had gone to London like I had wound up in LA. And he had made it big, if you will, like I made it big, you know, like I made it big, but I didn't. And he had major label deals with Island and major publishing deals, and toured with John Martin, who was a huge English artist, and Sandy Denny.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Another artist who I can never remember, who was a cult artist, whose name I can't think of now, but he toured with all of them and was known as a guitar player's guitar player. And anyway, I listened to his records when I got back from the tour. And that was 2020. I had major spine surgery and major hand surgery in January and February of 2020. Then COVID hit, and I never made it back to being a performer again, and probably never will be, because I say that, who knows, but my back is so bad and the pain is so bad all the time. And then I got this awful thing called vertigo or Meniere's disease, and gosh. And then 2 rounds with COVID, and then I nearly died and all that. Meanwhile, after I listened to Dave's records, I chose 22 songs of Dave's, and I put together this album. I don't know whether you can see that.
Yes. Still Life.
Still Life, which is the name of one of his songs.
Yes.
This has, and he's written hundreds of songs, and but these were 22 of my favorites. And I got my worldwide team of PR guys and record promoters and radio people together, and they all did it for me for nothing, to help me help Dave get this record out.
Yes.
And for once get the world to hear Dave's songs.
Yes.
And
That's
we
wonderful.
talked FaceTime every day for a couple of years, for hours, and talked about everything that you just, because we love each other, and we got to know each other so well, and there were so many things in common. And I said one day, my biggest regret is we didn't get to make an album together. And he said, man, me too. And over the next year, we managed to write 12 songs together, and we made a record together. And I produced it in my home studio. And again, I got my guys to help with this. And again, we had a hit record, and over 300 stations worldwide still playing the thing. And then he died. And one of the biggest ironies of my life is that I nearly died from pneumonia. And the day that I got out of the hospital, the next day, Dave's partner called, Dave's wife, they'd been married by then. She said, Dave died from complications of pneumonia. He died the same time I was in the hospital.
Yeah. You guys had that connection. See, there's that connection right there.
Yeah.
You know?
And it felt like to me that the universe let me take some of the burden of his pneumonia off of his shoulders, so he could let go, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the songs that he and I wrote together,
That's
were
wonderful.
magnificent songs. I'll send you this and the songs, the ones that he and I wrote together.
Oh, that would be nice.
And appreciation for you letting me laugh and cry on your show.
That's what this is about, Bob. That's what this show for me is it's not so much an interview, it's just you guys telling your story. You know,
Yeah.
that's what it's about. You know, and,
Well, it's
and,
still going on, and thank you from the bottom of my heart to get to say all this stuff out loud. In a way, this almost takes the place of the book that people keep trying to get me to write, and the podcast that I will still do it on that 15-page thing that my first wife wrote, because
Yeah.
it's a verbatim, day-to-day, hour by hour
Yeah.
explanation of exactly what happened and with whom it was happening. But all of these stories are, they're written in stone somewhere in the ether,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I get to revisit them, and there are pictures that go along with them, and I guess that's the gift of getting to live. That's why I'm here and have been here. You people wonder what life is about and what are we doing here? Well, and I've never thought of it this way, but I guess that's what I'm doing here.
Yeah. Well, that's what we need artists for,
Yeah.
musicians, is to relate that, that what we all have in common, what we all experience, and in a way that it touches people and it means, and that's what, to me, anyway, I think it's what it's done. But this has been really rewarding, and I mean, this whole process, and then when I get the feedback, from fans or people posting comments about
That'll be great.
yeah, it's great. And any one of those that I get, I'll forward it to you if you don't mind.
No, please do.
You know, um, because they're all, I mean, there've been some really wonderful ones, really, really special ones, how much this has meant to me. And, your music has, touched my life. And, it's, when I was in a low place, that those kind of comments, really mean something, and that's what music to me is. Yeah.
And me too. And I don't get to listen to much music, but because I'm doing it all the time, there sure is a lot of incredible stuff, and there's no shortage of writers in the younger generation.
Yeah.
They're just amazing people that I see on YouTube. And because I said I wrote over 200 songs since COVID, and the last couple of months, I've not been a writer. I've been a guy putting those songs together, finishing the production of those songs.
That's pretty much, yeah.
That's going to take me a long time. But the other day I wrote a song, so it's not like I'm not going to ever write again, and I know I will. But
right.
But
that's the thing about COVID. As they say, every cloud has a silver lining, right? It was the upside of it was, like you said, people couldn't perform live, so they were in a way forced. They were in their own little space. The only thing they could do is write, and so it was kind of a mixed blessing. There was little, of that. So
well, it turned it. I think that there's so many blessings that came out of it for me, that getting to learn how to play my own parts, getting to learn how to run this equipment, to really pay attention to the production of a song, to learn what to leave out and what to leave in, and to minimize, and then there's the thing about a lot of people who do what I've been doing for years didn't go the way that I went with my time. And a lot of people who I know have suffered a lot because they didn't get to do what they had been doing. And a question could be, Bob, do you miss performing? And have you really given up performing? And do you ever think you'll perform again? And I don't think I can answer any of those questions because I've been so active at doing what I'm doing.
Yep.
And it saved me from, I mean, maybe the grief or the sadness that some of my dear friends have gone through, because I played 68 shows, live Facebook shows, almost in a row. And while I was writing these songs, and the shows consisted of me saying, I got this new song that I'm writing on. Here's how it goes. Tomorrow is, here's how it goes now. And the next day is, I finished it, and what do you think? And then and then the way these songs were coming, they came so fast that I'd have to make quick demos to get on to the next song that was incoming, you know. So what I wound up with was a bunch of guitar vocal demos that I made just to save them so I could remember what they sounded like. And a couple of years into all this, I realized I'm going to make some records of these songs, and they're going to be called the way they were written, because, and I'm going to make them in these demos. So what I started doing was making demos with the guitar vocals, which is really a drag when it comes to recording, because you really need to separate the guitar from the vocal, because you get bleed over, and you can't control the EQ on the guitar or the vocal. But I wanted it to be real, like it was when it was written. So to that degree, they are real, but I've added these other parts, which now I've learned to play. Yeah. So they're now what they are. So well, instead of, go ahead.
I was going to say, I like that, you know, showing the progression. I like
yeah,
that.
Yeah. It was really fun. And every now and then, maybe once every couple of weeks, it's usually late at night and I'm working on something, and I have to play. I have to turn on live Facebook and play a couple of songs, just because I really want to play to people who are there. Sometimes they're not there because it's late, but inevitably there are a few people who are up and they'll give me feedback and let me know they're still there and that they still care about what I do, and they miss not hearing me play, and that's good stuff, you know.
Well, you're staying in touch with your audience that way too.
Yeah.
Your fans. Well, so it's just your own channel on YouTube is what you're talking about?
Yeah, I have a YouTube channel. I also have a Pandora channel.
Okay, so people can check that out.
Yeah, and there's also that there's a relatively new thing called Bandcamp.
Yes, right. Yep, familiar.
That's a good thing.
I think it is. People speak highly.
Yeah. Anybody can go listen, but for those people of us who are on Bandcamp, we can share things. We can actually write together. We can give each other feedback. And I haven't participated much because it's like I don't do tweeting and Twitter and that other thing.
I don't either.
Ray Wiley Hubbard one time told me, he said, you really need, he said, my wife told me I need to do that. And he said, I didn't want to do it, but I've started to do it because Judy told me I need to do it. So I started to do it because Ray said I needed to do it, but it didn't last long because I just can't keep up with this stuff because there's so much going on in my head and in my computer that I'm working on.
Yeah.
So forgive me if I don't stay in
people are on
touch
there
with you.
all the time, and you have to be responding to everybody and
Yeah,
writing.
yeah.
It's like a full-time job, you know. I
It
don't do
is,
it.
yeah.
I don't do it
Yeah.
either. The only reason I use Facebook, unless an artist has their own website, is a way to get in contact with people. That's the only way.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I use Facebook.
Yeah.
Just to
Well,
reach out.
I get to keep up with for the same reason, and also hear my friends' songs. Like I
Yeah.
play on Facebook, other people do too, but there's a lot of people who post stuff that ought to be heard.
Right.
And YouTube is just, it's an endless stream of amazing new stuff from young people.
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's meet somewhere. And you ever come to Austin?
It's been years, but I would love to come down there.
Well, I'd love to have you. You're welcome to come visit us. And I'm going to California Tuesday for 5 weeks to visit with all of the friends that I've made over the 25 years that I lived there.
Oh, okay.
I'm not playing a gig. First time I've been on the road and not played a gig.
Hope you have some happy reunions out there.
I will. It's all planned out. It's just like a tour, It's a tour of friends. So
there you go. I like that, tour of friends.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Bob. Man, I do appreciate that. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you, man. You are a great person for doing this, because people, you've helped me today a lot, and thank you, and thanks for being there and for asking me to do it.
Well, I've been told I'm a good listener, so that's what this is mostly about for me. And people like you that do like to talk, I just kind of like take it and run with it.
Well, you said in preparation for this the other day, you said, think of some things that you'd like to talk about.
Right.
And I said, I don't really need to do that. And I didn't. And I don't think I've stopped talking for an hour and a half now.
No, I don't think so either.
I'm really hungry now. I'm going to go get something to eat.
Go get something to eat. And we will stay in touch, keep in touch. And I will send you the link once I get this edited a little bit. I don't think they'll have to edit out that much, actually. So get that over to you, and appreciate again your time and for sharing so much, Bob. Thank you so much.
Well, whoever is listening to this is the guy that you should thank, and thank you all for listening to what I've had to say. And
all right,
let's pray for America.
There you go.
And thanks, and see you later.
All right, Bob.
Stay in touch.